Hi everybody, welcome to Tidal Wave Studio. My name is Patrick Damiani and today I would like to talk a little bit about gain staging. What is that all about? Okay, gain staging. What actually is that? I'm going to try to explain everything in a very simple way. Basically, gain staging is always having an eye on your levels, whether you're recording or mixing or mastering. Always try to stay safe with the level of your audio. Let's start right at the source. When you're recording something, what would gain stage mean here? Well, let's assume you have a microphone and want to record a voice. The first thing your microphone signal sees is the preamp. So this is the unit that is going to amplify your microphone signal up to a more usable level. So this is either a standalone preamp or it is built into your interface. The control you have here is the gain knob. So how hot should I record? How loud should I go? Well, there are two ways to approach this. Either you go very safe so that you have zero distortion and a very clean signal. Then stay soft with your signal. There is no need to go super hot with your signal. We are not recording on tape anymore where noise floor is an issue. If you're recording in 24-bit, you have a huge dynamic range to work within. And even if you are super quiet with your signal, you won't have any audio degradation. You won't have any noise issue at all. You can just stay very safe. What does really safe level mean? I usually record so that the peaks of my audio stay, let's say, below minus 10 dB, minus 15 dB, sometimes minus 20. It doesn't really matter. Even if you would be like at minus 40 dB in 24-bit, that's still better quality than a CD, which only has 16-bit. So no need to worry to go super hot. The only thing is that some preamps, they start to develop a really nice sound when you go in a little bit hotter. Like for example, a Neve 1073 preamp, it adds some nice harmonic saturation and overtones if you go in a little bit hotter. And then usually you go in hot and on the output stage you go down a little bit, not to clip the next stage, which we are going to talk about. This is going from your preamp into your converter. The converter is the device that's going to turn your analog signal into ones and zeros, basically, so that you can work with it in the computer. And what you definitely don't want is clip your converter. What does clip the converter mean? Well, this means going above 0 dBFS. If you imagine 0 dB as being the ceiling of your room, this is the limit. There is no going through this. And if you imagine the room with your ceiling, if you try to jump through the ceiling, you're only going to knock your head, which is no good. The same goes for your audio signal. If you want to go past the ceiling of 0 dB, it's going to be cut off square and it's going to sound really ugly. And that's not what you want, because digital clipping into the converter really sounds nasty most of the time. Okay, now we are past the preamp, past the converter, we are in the computer. Which is really cool nowadays is that most audio programs work in 32-bit float or 64-bit float, which basically gives you an enormous dynamic range to work within. You almost cannot clip or distort your signal once you are inside the computer. There are two exceptions though, and this is where our gain staging thing comes into play again. The first of which is going through plugins that emulate older analog gear. Analog gear tends to have a non-linear behavior, which means that the hotter you go in, the more distortion these pieces of gear develop, which may or may not be something desirable. Some pieces of gear are especially desirable because they develop harmonic overtones that really enrichen the sound. The only thing you need to take care of is knowing about this and choosing a level to operate at which gives you the result you want. You want to stay very clean? Stay at a pretty low volume, like minus 20 dB or so. If you want to experiment with overtones and saturation, try and go in hotter and see what happens. I've made a little experiment for you just to show you what exactly happens. I set up two identical channels which have a signal generator generating a sine wave. Then they go into an emulation of an LA2A compressor, which is emulating a tube compressor. And then we are going into an analyzer, seeing what has happened to our pure sine wave going through that analog piece of gear inside the computer. And then one channel is going in very hot, hotter than is recommended, very close to 0 dB at minus 0.2 dB, and the other one is going in at minus 30 dB, so with lots of headroom for the compressor to operate at. Now the compressor is not doing anything, it's not doing any compression, the signal is just running through, and that compressor is basically emulating what the tube circuitry would do to your signal. Now let's have a look at the analyzer with the hot and the not so hot signal. So this is our sine wave, around 650 Hertz. Going into a compressor. I'm going to turn off now the signal because it's annoying to listen to, but it's still active in the chain. So now we are going into this compressor, which is not doing any gain reduction at all, but we are going in at a modest volume like minus 30 dB. And now this is what's happening with our sine signal. This is the original frequency that has been generated, and now you can already see this compressor generating overtones. These tones have not been there going into the compressor, but already at this modest level, this piece of gear is emulating the addition of harmonic overtones. But now, look what happens going in hotter. This is the result going into the same compressor just at a much hotter level. Look at all those overtones that have appeared here that have not been there before. Just because we went in much hotter than is maybe recommended for this piece of gear. You can do it, but just be aware that you're going to add in distortion. Depending on the piece of gear, on its behavior, many plugins won't introduce any harmonic distortion, some will. So just be aware that this is the part of the gain staging that really matters. How hot am I going in, and what is happening if I go in hotter or less hot? The way I go about it is, first I use my ears. If I like it, then I don't care. If I'm not sure whether I'm clipping or not, but there is input and output level indicators in almost any plugin. If you want to be really safe, just stay away from the red, stay away from 0 dB. Especially be careful if you're going, for example, into an EQ where you can boost gain. If you're adding, let's say, 1 kilohertz plus 6 dB, you're going to have a louder signal going out of the EQ than going in. Just pay attention to how loud was I going in, and maybe you will have to adjust the output or the input of that EQ just to not overload the next piece of gear that you're going in. Even if your plugin itself is not overloading, maybe the next one will react a little bit more sensitively to the level that you are going in. So basically either stay far away from 0, like at minus 10, minus 20, or if you want to experiment with saturation or harmonic distortion, yeah, go in hotter, but just be aware of what's happening under the hood. Okay, now let's assume that you took care of all the plugins and all the individual tracks. Now what still matters is the sum of everything. All these tracks that you have in a mixing session are going to come together in the master bus. This is where all signals are summed up, and basically, again, inside the computer, you cannot really overload that master track. Even if you have like 200 tracks at next to 0 dB going in, the dynamic range in 32-bit float, for example, is like 1500 dB of dynamic range. So that's enormous. You almost cannot overload that master track. But you still have to get out of the program again into the real world. So as soon as you leave this 32 or 64-bit float realm, you're going down again to 24-bit, where you again have a ceiling of 0 dBFS that you cannot cross or should not try to cross. So what can you do? Pull down your master fader until you are far away from 0 dB with your peaks. Then, to get closer to this ceiling of 0 dBFS in a safe way, add a limiter or use some compression before to just tame the dynamics a little bit of your general mix, and then add a limiter to safely approach those 0 dBFS so that you don't clip the converters going out of the computer again into the real world. And that's it. That's all the magic of gain staging. Stay away from unwanted distortion and don't go ridiculously quiet so that you may risk getting some noise mixed into your very, very soft signal that will then be amplified at a later stage and annoy you then. That's all there is to know about it, and don't go completely crazy with numbers and it has always to be this number or that number. That's nonsense. We are living in a real world where there is not a certain number that you can put to everything. So just be reasonable, stay in a somewhat reasonable range of anything between -10 to -20 or even below with your individual signals. Have a look at your master fader and you are safe to go. I hope there was something of use for you in this little video. If you have any more specific questions, leave me a comment down below and I may cover it in an upcoming video. Thanks for watching, stay safe and see you next time. Bye bye.